Volca sample is a sample-based groove machine, which means it uses pre-recorded samples to make your music.
What's up? You got your boy Dyreck, aka Native Shades, reminding you to hit that like and subscribe button, cause we gonna be talking about the Volca sample. What had happened was the Volca sample. The Volca sample came out around 2014. And the music production space, it's kind of strange. It goes through its phases. Sometimes there's an excitement and everybody's waiting for a product to drop, but then sometimes there's a lull and it's quiet. This was during a time when there was kind of a lull and it was quiet. Now, Korg did have kind of a buzz because they did drop the Volca beats, the Volca bass, and the Volca keys. And a lot of people were enjoying the Volcas. They were small pieces of gear. They were for a good price, about $150, $160, and people were getting enjoyment out of them. So you started hearing rumors that Korg was gonna drop a Volca sample. So, once you say sampler or sample, the sampling communities, their ears pop up like a dog hearing a whistle. As soon as you say a sampler, it's like, So Korg drops the Volca sample, and its reception is great. It's getting rave reviews. People are like, man, I love the Volca sample. Every forum, every YouTube video, everybody loves the Volca sample. You know what I mean? People are like, man, I haven't been this creative in years. You're hearing that constantly through every forum. And the Volca sample was a good sample player. It had a great sound. I think it was 31 kilohertz, 16-bit. Man, that sound, it makes your samples sound incredible. You could put those specs on another sampler and it doesn't sound like the Volca sample. The Volca sample sound engine is really nice. It had a great matrix as far as on the sample player itself, where all the knobs are and everything like that, where you can do the high cut, the low cut, the pitch. You could do the decay, the attack, the bass treble. You could add swing. You know what I'm saying? You can add reverb, and it is a creative way of making music because everything, all the knobs and effects is right there real time, that you do make music a different way. It was a standalone device, works on batteries. You could take it with you to the train, to your car, to the park. You could take it with you to work and start making music, It had a great speaker. It had a speaker on the unit. Korg had an opportunity, I feel, to corner the sampling market. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people that were accustomed to working on DAWs and they were kind of afraid of hardware, they would look at something like the Volca sample and say, hey man, this thing's only $150 and it looks kind of cool. Hey, I'll spend the money to check out how it is. And the Volca sample was actually pretty good. And if Korg did it just right, I think they would have had people transition from the DAW to the Volca sample. But the Korg Volca sample, with all its good sides, it did have its downsides. And one of the biggest downsides that the Volca sample had was getting samples on the machine. Korg decided to, instead of creating an app that just gets the samples to and from the machine, like via USB, or even creating a record in or something like that, Korg decided to leave it up to third-party developers and give them the code and say, okay, hey, you guys figure out how to get samples onto and from this machine. Korg did have an audio pocket thing, but it was kind of janky. It worked sometimes with some machines. It wouldn't work with other machines. So these developers are creating different apps to get samples to and from the machine. And it's still sometimey. Like on some products, like I heard some people with Apple computers didn't have too much problems, but the PC community was having issues. They were having problems trying to get samples to and from this machine. And then when you're trying to reach out to the developer, you're finding out, the company's been shut down, or the guy's been arrested in Sri Lanka and won't be out for 2 years or something like that. It's serious. It was crazy. So people was like, man, Korg, why don't you just make a way for us to get our samples to and from this machine? Why don't you create it instead of giving it to these guys? And Korg had a weird way of transferring the data. It wasn't through, let's say, a record in input. Korg had a sync in input. So it was kind of, it went from your, let's say your computer or your source headphone jack into the sync in, but the data frequency, it wasn't audio you'd hear this screeching data sound. It was kind of like, remember them old school modems, like when you had Windows 98 and it was dial up and you'd hear the kind of like a fax machine. That's what was going on with the Volca sample, how to get samples in there. And because of that, your volume had to be on a perfect level. Like, let's say you put the volume on 13. It won't work on 13. You try it on 9. It won't work on 9. You try it on 9.5. It works on 9.5. Then the next day, you're trying to put another song, you're on 9.5. It won't work on 9.5. You're doing on 10. It won't work on 10. It won't work at all. So I think that's where Korg kind of had problems with. Some people that were using iOS devices, meaning like an iPad or iPhone or a tablet or something, they had an easier time doing it. They didn't really have that much problems. But not everybody wants to introduce an iOS device into their music production space. You know what I mean? Because for some people, if you got to go from your computer to an iOS device, to the Volca sample, then from the Volca sample to the iOS device, to the computer, you start saying, you know what? Maybe I should just pull out my MPC and do it that way. You know what I mean? So Korg Volca sample also didn't allow you to, let's say if you hooked up a MIDI keyboard to it, you'd be able to, take a sample and play it pitched up like you would like a synth or something like that. It didn't allow you to do that. Some people had issues with that. But it was really just the getting the samples to and from the Volca sample that annoyed some people, you know what I'm saying? But other than that, the Volca sample was a very great piece of gear, and it sounded incredible. Once again, I thought it was dope that Korg put a speaker on the Volca sample, because it allows you, sometimes you don't want to do the whole, connect your headphones to this and that. Sometimes you just want to rock out. And the Volca sample actually allowed you to do that. There were times I had get-togethers over, and no lie, I rocked the crowd with the Volca sample by itself. It's really a fun piece of gear to play with. Since then, I heard there was a developer that kind of created a way so that you can play pitch samples on the Volca sample, and you can play it like a synth. He created a way for you could play chords on the Volca sample, and he made it so that the sample selection is a lot easier. It kind of turns the Volca sample more into a synth or a sound module than a sample player. But some people might not mind using it as a sound module, and they might be perfectly fine with that. So that's cool, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's the Volca sample. What had happened was... So what's your experience with the Volca sample, if you used it before? Let me know. So this is your boy Dyreck, aka Native Shades, reminding you to like and subscribe, and I'm signing off.